The politics of boom and bust. All right, so what's going on this week? Let's see, we haven't been in school for a week because of various snow issues. And next week we're supposed to get, according to the weather channels, we're supposed to get like, I don't know, like a foot of snow or more. Of course, by the time you're watching this, we will know by that time. If it's a foot, that my corgi, she won't be able to. It'll be fun. I'll take pictures. Anyway, the politics of boom and bust. Our next president, number 29, Mr. Harding. So Warren Harding, Republican, and so we're going to have a situation where we have three people running. We've got the progressive, we've got the Democrat, and we've got the, I said progressive, really the socialist, right? All right, it says socialist up there. Debs, of course, remember, he's running from jail. We've got Cox as a Democrat and Harding. So come on, use your words today. The Democrat and the Socialists are going to split the votes, and the Republicans are going to come in. All right, so what are we getting with Harding? His big phrase is we're going to return to normalcy. Normalcy? Normalcy. We're going to return to normal, and it's normalcy. Okay. And so why are we not normal? Oh, because we were in a war, right? And so now we're going to get back to normal. Was not very. Oh wait, sorry. He was very popular as a president, at least for a little bit. He's going to die. He's going to have that brain hemorrhage thing. He was elected in 1920. Oh, remember the curse of Tippecanoe, right? Okay, so 1920. Lots of scandals and stuff. Oh, okay. So we'll see. His presidential cabinet. Interesting guys. Let's see. Charles Hughes. Charles Hughes did a pretty good job as Secretary of State. Andrew Mellon. We've already talked about Mellon and from the last video. Andrew Mellon, the big guy. It was the aluminum, right? Yeah, aluminum, and he's the one that did trickle down economics. The first one to kind of push that out there. And under him, we actually made a surplus instead of having debt and deficit and all that kind of stuff. So Herbert Hoover, an excellent Secretary of Commerce. Okay, so he got some pretty good guys in there. Oh, and then we got some other guys. Oops. We've got Albert Hall. Albert Hall, he's a Secretary of Interior. You may recall the Secretary of Interior, what is he in charge of? The Secretary of Interior is in charge of national parks, right? And conservation and things like that. Right. Our Secretary of Interior, Albert Hall, he doesn't believe in conservation. The guy who's in charge of it doesn't believe. I'm sure it'll work out. And then Harry Daugherty is going to be our Secretary of, our Attorney General, and he's going to make some poor decisions and end up going to jail. You know, the most important lawyer in the United States of America, the Attorney General, going to go to jail. It's exciting stuff. We've got, that's the group down there. We've got an interesting political cartoon here where we've got all the cabinet members and or other important guys, and they've kind of got their hands back behind their backs looking for a bribe. Let's start with this one. So let's see, in the early 1920s, business is going to make a comeback. So we have the Republicans are going to push business. They're going to put businesses over individuals, maybe. Republicans passed legislation to help businesses make profits. Corporations aren't worried as much when it comes to all the monopoly issues, because remember, Taft and Roosevelt were really anti-monopoly, and now that the Republicans are back in, the corporations are going, time to play. And so let's see, the Interstate Commerce Commission, Executive Committee, were good friends with the railroad owners. It's never good when the government and the owners of the railroads are friends. And, things happen, and suddenly you get all sorts of crazy things going on. The Supreme Court struck down progressive legislation. Oh, so we have a Supreme Court case, Atkins versus Children's Hospital, 1923. So what's going on here is that we have this lady, gosh, well, I'm going to say Ms. Atkins, because off the top of my head, I don't remember her name. Was it Atkins? Anyway, she worked in a children's hospital. She worked as the elevator lady, the one who stands there and pushes the buttons for you. And so she worked for $35 a month plus 2 meals a day. And she worked not very many hours, like 4 hours, 5 hours a day. And it's a pretty easy job. And she talked about how this was really the only job that she could get, and it was enough. The $35 a month and the 2 meals a day was enough for her. Well, the state is going to pass a law, a minimum wage law for women and children. They're going to say that you're paying women and children like nothing out there, and so we're going to put in a minimum wage law for women and children. Well, that minimum wage was more than the $35 a month for the elevator lady, and so she was fired. She was fired because they couldn't afford to pay her the minimum wage. So she sued, and she said, "No, I don't want the minimum wage. I have the right to say that I have the right to decide how little I'm going to get paid, and I'm okay with that." So the argument was the same thing with Lochner versus New York. We talked about that 2 videos ago. Lochner versus New York was the bakers in New York City, and the bakers were saying you can't enforce a time limit, the amount of hours, a maximum number of hours that we work. If we want to work more than we want to work, more than you want us to work, we can make that deal with our bosses. We can make that deal. So here's the reverse. Here, the government's coming in saying to the corporations, you have to pay a certain amount. And, well, let's see. The argument is going to be, well, you can't do that. You can't make a minimum wage for women and children. And here's why. Because look at the time period. This is 1923. What just passed, right? 1920 with the 19th Amendment that said, women are now equal with regard to being able to vote for the president. So if women are equal to men, wink, wink, with regard to all these government policies, why should there be a minimum wage assigned for them? Nationwide minimum wage decision in the Supreme Court of the United States. The decision affirms your constitutional right to starve. Interesting. Okay, new topic. Lots of stuff. So we're done with the war, and we've got all these ships out there that we're not going to use anymore because we're never going to get into war ever again, and we're going to sell off a lot of our ships, make some money. The railroads are going to be put back under private control. They were taken over by the government, right, so that we could streamline the process of getting all the tanks and the planes across the pond, and so the railroads are going to be put back in private control. Veterans Board is created to operate hospitals. We still have that today, right? The VA. And the American Legion, a veteran support group, is formed. So the American Legion. Oh, you guys are mostly juniors. So when you're a senior, we do have the American Legion Award that goes to the outstanding senior boy and the outstanding senior girl. And it's kind of one of those, it doesn't come with a lot of money. I think it's like, I'm going to say $500 scholarship. But it's kind of one of those, oh, you're the American Legion person. I know the guy who won it in 1989. He's a great guy. But it could be you someday, here in a year. Okay, but here's the big one. The Adjusted Compensation Act of 1924. Okay, pay attention. Because gave all former soldiers of World War I a sum of money based on the years served. All right, so here's what's going on. You get $1 a day for every day that you were in the Army, or you were in the military, and $1.25 for every day that you were in the military and you were overseas. And so it's going to be one lump sum. If it turns out that it was like $50, that's all you're going to make, they're just going to give you cash money and just hand it to you and say, all right, good. But if it was more than that, then they were going to put it in a savings bond, and they're going to lock it into a 20-year bond, which means hey, here's your service, and it was a maximum of like $500 if you were at home, and if you went across the seas, maximum you could get was $625. Now, saying that, that's in the 1920s money. So if we're talking about today, we're looking at $8,000 total. So I mean, it's not like millions of dollars, but you know, hey, if somebody wants to hand me $8,000, I'll take it. But the problem is, you can't get it for 20 years. They're going to put it into this bond. They're going to lock it and say, in 20 years, you can get the full money. If you want to take it out early, you're not going to get the full amount of money. Well, I don't know about that. We're going to pay you for doing that for us, and we're not going to pay you for 20 years. I bet you people are going to get upset about this. I bet. Well, it's not really a bet, because I know it's coming up here in about 8-9 slides. All right. So, as last we left, we didn't have a treaty with Germany, right? And so it's going to take 3.5 years. I think I said 2 years before, but 3.5 years before we finally get a treaty with Germany. Congress declares the war's over in July of 1921. Yay, we're officially out of the war now. It's been over for 3 years. Harding was an isolationist, and he hated the League of Nations. So if you recall, Wilson pushed the League of Nations, the 14th point of the 14 points. He pushed it, and the Republicans said no. And so here's Harding. He agrees. He says, no, we're not going to do it. We're going to ignore the League of Nations. We've got oil companies over in Britain, oil companies over in the Middle East. We're sharing rights with Britain. We've got things going on with the Five Powers. And so the Five Powers Treaty of 1922 says that, I'm going to name them, ready? Okay. United Kingdom, United States, France, Japan, and Italy, because Italy. Those five powers got together and they said, all right, let's make a rule. You can only have so many ships in the Atlantic, and they can only have so much tonnage. So like tonnage, so that's how big they are. And then later in the year they had the Four-Power Treaty, except it was in the Pacific, and so that would be UK, United States, France, and Japan, not Italy, because Italy. Okay, same idea. I wonder if we all followed those rules. I wonder which country broke the rules of the treaty. No, I don't wonder. I know. And you probably should know too if you know your world history, because there's something coming in the 1940s coming up. All right. Speaking of war, did I just give away a huge plot? The Caliban Pact. So this is named after Secretary of State Kellogg and French Foreign Minister Briand, and this is going to outlaw war. So it's right. It is officially the 67. Do I have it up there? The 67-ish countries that signed it. Let's see, the United States and France and Germany signed it first, and then 60 some odd other countries jumped on, and it outlawed war. In fact, I have the text. I would like to read to you the entire treaty. It's not the treaty, it's a pact. Here we go. 2 articles. Article 1. The high contracting parties solemnly declare in the names of their respective peoples that they condemn recourse to war for the solution of international controversies and renounce it as an instrument of national policy in their relations with one another. Article 2. The high contracting parties agree that the settlement or solution of all disputes or conflicts of whatever nature or of whatever origin they may be, which may arise amongst them, shall never be sought except by pacific means. That's it. That's the entire pact. So basically it just says, you can't declare war ever again. It's not allowed. It's against the law. You can't do it. Nobody can declare war. Hey, interestingly enough, that's still in effect, because it didn't have an end date, and so that's still in effect. And you think to yourself, how many times has anybody in the entire world declared war since 1921? Well, not as many times as you would think. And you're sitting here thinking, yeah, there's been like hundreds of wars. Oh, well, okay, we've had hundreds of conflicts, but actually declaring war, like somebody actually writing the word down, war, and then people voting on it. Well, let's see. World War II. Okay, sure. Korea. Did we declare war? I guess we did declare war. We're talking about the United States. North Korea declared war on South Korea. They're still doing that. Vietnam, North Vietnam versus South Vietnam. The United States never declared war. Let's see. The Hutus and the Tutsis down in Rwanda. That's kind of a civil war kind of an issue. The Serbs and the Croats in Bosnia and Herzegovina. That's kind of a civil war. Nobody really declared war there. The Cold War. Well, no, nobody really declared war. Desert Storm. Did we declare war on Iraq, or did we declare war on the terrorists? The war on terrorism, because we didn't declare war on Afghanistan. I mean, really, you really start thinking about it. People just fight. They don't actually declare. They don't declare war. Yeah, something to think about. Russia and Afghanistan. Did Russia declare? Or, I'm sorry, the Soviet Union. Did they declare war on Afghanistan? I don't know. I don't think they did. Oh, Iran and Iraq. Pretty sure they. Oh, right, and of course, obviously, 1967, the whole Yom Kippur War and the whole, jump on Israel kind of a thing. So, the Falkland War. We've had a couple, right, but not like as many as you thought, because I'm going to move on. All right. So after the war, we've got we're now remember the Great Rapprochement. We're best friends with England, and now we're best buddies with France because we saved them from the evil Germans. And from the point of view of World War I, and then so now Europe's going to start flooding the United States with all their stuff, and so the United States, we're going to go, no, we don't want your cheap stuff. We're going to raise tariffs so that our cheap stuff, the people will buy our cheap stuff, and not y'all's cheap stuff. So we're going to raise tariffs to do that. And so we have the Fordney-McCumber tariff. It's going to raise it up to, 35%. And including that, the President of the United States has the ability to raise it 50% of that more if he, I was about to say he or she, but we don't have a she yet, he wants. And this is going to be an issue because we raise our tariff to keep so that protects our companies. Well, Europe's going to look at that and go, well, wait, we're going to raise our tariff too. And so that way that our stuff that we're selling to them is now more expensive. So both sides are going to raise tariffs. I wonder what happened. No, I keep saying that. I know what happens. Moving on. All right. President Harding, before he died of the brain hemorrhage, he was involved in, his people were involved in a lot of scandals. So here are three of them. There were more. Here are three. Let's see. Colonel Charles Forbes, head of the Veterans Bureau, took $200 million out of what was supposed to go into hospitals for veterans and put it in his pocket. Interestingly enough, that wasn't the biggest scandal of Harding's tenure. Attorney General Daugherty, he's going to sell presidential pardons. He's going to sell them. So it's literally a get out of jail free, and I can buy it. And so, for example, he's going to sell a presidential pardon to Eugene Debs, the socialist who ran for president while in jail. Okay. Oh, and also Daugherty is going to sell liquor licenses for the right price, the president will sign, the attorney general will sign a piece of paper that says you get to sell liquor. You say to yourself, what's the big deal? Oh, you know what the big deal is because it's prohibition, remember? Can't sell, make, manufacture, or transport liquor unless you have the presidential thing because, you know, it's medical liquor. Blink, 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 blink. Medical liquor. That wasn't the biggest scandal. The biggest scandal was actually the Teapot Dome scandal. And so the Teapot Dome, and so here's the short version of it. The Navy owned lots of land out there in Wyoming. And you're sitting there, I'll let you think that for a second. The Navy owned a lot of land in Wyoming. Right, for those of you who aren't really familiar with how geography works, there's not a lot of Navy ships that can get to Wyoming easily. Yeah. So, the Secretary of Interior, Albert Hall, right. I have Albert Fall up there. I don't know, probably misprint. I put that up there. Anyway, the Secretary of Interior, Albert, he negotiated for those lands to be given, to be removed from the Navy and be put into the Secretary of Interior's group of lands that he has. And so, of course, I'm sure the Navy guy was like, yeah, we're not using them, so yeah, you can have them. And so then the Secretary of Interior says, great, and then he leases the land to these private oil companies. Now, here's the deal in the government: if you're going to give, or if you're going to have a contract, and this works like at all levels, even down to like Western Heights Public Schools. If we're going to try to get somebody to build something, or if we want them to, if we want brand new textbooks, or we want something like that, we have to go out and we have to solicit from a lot of different people, and then basically we look at the price and what they're offered, and we are required basically to take the lowest price at the best deal. It's not necessarily the lowest price, but at the best deal for the lowest price. So, and so that's, you know, when we construct new buildings around here, or we get brand new textbooks. Brand new textbooks. Our history books have George W. Bush as the current president. Anyway, the point is, yeah, he was like, how many presidents ago? It doesn't matter. The Secretary of Interior did not take bids. So he just basically gave this land, rented this land out to these oil companies. Oh, and then found out that suddenly the Secretary of Interior, suddenly had $100,000 in his bank account that, oops, he didn't have before. And they traced it out. It turns out he was taking bribes. So not only was he not taking bidding wars, but he was taking bribes from these oil companies, and that is what got him in trouble. In fact, he's going to go to jail for this. So why do we call this the Teapot Dome scandal? Well, right there, up in Wyoming, there's the the rock outcropping, and if you squint your eyes really hard, you can see it clearly looks like a teapot. Squint them harder, and then kind of look off, maybe off to the left, and squeeze one eye really shut. And then, but anyway, it's supposed to look like a teapot, and so there you go. And so I kind of almost see it if you compare it to the cartoon over there, the political cartoon of it says, "Who says a watched pot never boils?" That's pretty clever. I like that. So here we have the newspaper right here. The Teapot Dome suit is begun, and an interesting observation. I've seen this on several different sites. Before the Watergate scandal, Teapot Dome was regarded as the, quote, greatest and most sensational scandal in the history of American politics. Before we get to Watergate. Do you guys know Watergate? Do you know Watergate? We'll get there. Now I'm trying to think, is Watergate even the greatest compared to what we've been going through recently? Our next president, la 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 la, 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 la. Our next president, Calvin Coolidge. So he was vice president. He's going to take over after Harding has his situation, and Coolidge is going to take over. And he's known as Silent Cal. We'll talk about that a little bit. As vice president, he took, I just said that, known for his sparseness of talking. Coolidge is the exact opposite of Teddy Roosevelt / Donald Trump. He is not going to comment about stuff. He is not going to get in people's faces. He would never be on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. This guy, he would never do anything like that. He represented, I like this one, he represented the, quote, the genius of the average people. The genius of the average people. That's great. I really like that. I mean, we like to think that, you know, those of you watching this film, that we're all above average. We would like to think that, right? But you know, if you take all the people who are watching this, and we just put all of you in a room, half of you are below average of that group. Interesting. But then the other half are above the average of the above average people. Okay, remember that. Let's see, small government conservative. Check this out. Taxing more than necessary is legalized robbery. That's a quote from Coolidge. Taxing more than necessary is legalized robbery. This guy, right? Quote, perhaps one of the greatest accomplishments of my administration has been minding my own business. Right? So he, like I said, he's the anti-Theodore Roosevelt. He's the anti-Donald Trump here. And then another quote, we cannot do everything at once, but we can do something at once. So turn in stuff. You can't do it all at one time, but you can turn in today's assignment. Calvin Coolidge. So I pulled this off Wikipedia, just some anecdotes, stories about how quiet he is. So I'm just going to read it real fast. It goes like this. Although Coolidge was known to be a skilled and effective public speaker, in private he was a man of few words and was commonly referred to as Silent Cal. A possible apocryphal story has it a matron sitting next to him at a dinner said to him, quote, I made a bet today that I could get more than 2 words out of you. And he replied, you lose. Coolidge often seemed uncomfortable among fashionable Washington society. When asked why he continued to attend so many of their dinner parties, he replied, gotta eat somewhere. Alice Roosevelt Longworth, a leading Republican wit, understood Coolidge's silence and his dour personality. She said, quote, when he wished he were elsewhere, he pursed his lips, folded his arms, and said nothing. He looked then precisely as though he had been weaned on a pickle. Good times. As President, Coolidge's reputation as a quiet man continued. The words of the president have an enormous weight, he would later write, and ought not to be used indiscriminately. I'm going to paraphrase that. He just said, don't just go out there and talk about nothing you have that you don't have anything to deal with. Don't. This guy. Coolidge was aware of his stiff reputation. Indeed, he cultivated it. Quote, I think the American people want a solemn ass as a president, he once told Ethel Barrymore, and I think I will go along with them. All right, so what's going on here during Coolidge's tenure? We've got a situation with food. We have too much of it. We have too much food. Why do we have too much food? Well, remember, we went into this huge ramp-up production during the war to feed all the soldiers over there in Europe. And so the war's over, but we're still producing at that high level. And here's the problem with that the farmers had, was that the government was paying the farmers outrageous prices for the food because, you know, the government is going to pay what the government's going to pay. So they're paying these high prices, these wartime prices. The war's over, so the government's like, we don't actually need to pay those prices anymore. But the farmers, they're used to this really nice high level of price that they're getting for the food. So the farmers are going to complain about this. And Calvin Coolidge says, no, we're not going to pay you those prices anymore. No, that's ridiculous. Why would we pay you for extra food at these high prices? No. So, there you go. The McNary-Haugen bill promised that they would continue to pay the prices, and Coolidge says, no, we can't afford it. There's no point. We're going to have the next presidential election, and it's Coolidge versus Davis and La Follette. So we have a Democrat, a progressive, and a Republican. And again, the Democrat and the progressive split the votes, and we have the Republican wins. Oh, the progressive, he gets Wisconsin. He gets Wisconsin. Oh, I couldn't tell with my little finger trying to say, is that Michigan? I can't see it because it's a really small map in my viewer right there. Keep cool with Coolidge. Let's see. Interestingly enough, during the post-World War I, the United States is a creditor nation. I mean, you might argue we're still kind of a creditor nation because we're giving money to everybody, and we're going to move on from that. We talk all about that next year. Creditor nation. So we're going to be giving companies, we're going to be giving countries money to help get them out of their debts, full well expecting that they're going to pay us back at some point. Blink, 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 blink. Demanded Europe pay back its wartime loans. Europe responded with, okay. So we did give money to Europe. We're going to look at that here in a second on the graph. But one of the, and we said, hey, we gave you money. We'd like that back because it was a loan. And one of the responses from Europe was, hey, during the war, we lost a lot of people. You didn't lose very many, America. So why don't we just call this even? We lost people, you lost money, we'll call it even. And Calvin Coolidge, the president, says, no, that's not how that, we want our money back. Let's see, Mexico, during this time, Mexico declares oil independence, and American oil companies, they're going to ask to declare war against Mexico because they want their money, and Coolidge is going to ignore them. Haiti and Nicaragua are going to continue to be occupied by the United States for at least a couple more years. Again, remember the Roosevelt corollary. Nobody can mess with people over here in Latin America. Well, except we can. And then Calvin Coolidge continued the tradition of not recognizing the Soviet Union. So if you recall, 1917, they had the Bolshevik Revolution, and then ultimately, in the early 20s, we're going to have the Soviet Union become the Soviet Union. Russia becomes the Soviet Union. But the United States is not going to admit that they are the legitimate power. That the United States is like, no, that was an illegal takeover, and it should be like, who's left? Because they killed everybody in the family, right? Except for Anastasia. Wink. So we didn't recognize the Soviet Union, well, for a couple more years. So here's the big chart. So here's the game plan. France and Britain, they owe us money that we loan them for the war. And so France and Britain say, well, United States of America, we can't pay you back the money because Germany owes us money for the reparations back in the Treaty of Versailles. And so when Germany signed it, remember they admitted that, well, they had to sign it because they had to sign it. And so Germany has to pay for the damages of war. So they're going to pay back Britain and France. Britain and France say to the United States, we can't pay you until Germany pays us. Now watch this. So the United States says, okay, well, we can solve this problem. So the United States loans Germany money. The United States loans Germany money so they can pay back Britain and France. So then Britain and France can pay back the United States. Got it? Right? Yeah, let's see. The U.S. loans money to Germany. Germany then pays back France and Britain. France and Britain then pays back the United States. I mean, right? That totally makes sense. Thank goodness we don't do crazy stuff like this in the current time period. Oh yeah, we still haven't got our money from that yet. I know, you're shocked, right? You're shocked! Yeah, we haven't got our money back. Our next president, Herbert Hoover. Herbert seems like a good guy. He seems like a good guy, but he's gonna be unfortunate in that he's gonna be president during October 29th of 1929. What happened on October 29th of 1929? I'm glad you asked. Before we do that, let's talk about him a little bit. The first presidential candidate to use the radio for getting out the votes. Really? 1928 was the first time we... Okay, that makes sense. 1928, first time we have radio. Okay, yeah, I'll go with that. He was an isolationist. He was an individualist. He was a free enterpriseist. He's a small governmentist. I'm just making up words at this point. As last we left, we were raising tariffs. We're raising tariffs. Let's see. That's the middle one. The Hawley-Smoot tariff of 1930. We're going to raise tariffs to 60%, which is the highest ever during a non-war time. And of course, we're going to raise it to 60%, so Europe's going to raise it to 40%. Excuse me, we've got the world over here going to be squeezed. What else is going on? The Federal Farm Board. Oh man, yeah, Hoover's going to pull the reverse Coolidge, and he's going to say, yeah, you know what? We are going to pay the farmers, not just the farmers for food, for surplus food, but we're going to pay for surplus cotton being grown down in the South. And where's all that money coming from? Oh, taxes. I'm sure if we raise taxes, I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure. I mean, plus we have all this extra food and all this extra cotton lying around. You know, food and cotton, it doesn't go bad. Well, food doesn't go bad. Does cotton go bad? I don't know. Cotton goes well. You put okay. So what happens? On October 29th, 1929, we have a situation with the stock market. And it's going to plummet. Like, plummet! Which is a big fancy word. It means drops really far during one day. 508 points. 508 points. Ultimately, over 2 days, it's going to drop 22%. 22% of the entire stock market. Which is a big deal. I mean, obviously, that's a big deal. I mean, basically, you know, that's a quarter of people's wealth. I mean, if you were a millionaire and just all in the stock market, in 2 days you just lost $250,000. I mean, that's crazy money. So we call this Black Monday. 508 points. Now, interestingly enough, that is not the largest drop we've ever had in our history. Just recently, in the past, during your lifetime, we've had bigger drops than that. But we haven't had a drop the same percentage. So if we were looking at a 508 point drop compared to what it would be today, so right before I started filming, I looked on the stock market exchange and it said that the current stock market is sitting at 31,400. So 31,400 points-ish. 22%, should have done this before. All right, I can do this. 22% drop today would be, well, 22% of 31,400. You can do this math. If you take 10% is 31.4. You double that, you get 62.8, and then you have 62.8, and you add 620, and so you get 6,908 points. So the drop would be, today, if we equate it, it would be almost a 7,000 point drop. Oof. So there's a big deal. There's a big deal. The stock market dropping. It's a big deal. Why did it drop so fast at that time? Well, there are books and books and books and books and books and books written about this. We don't have a specific answer. We have a lot of possibilities, let's see, including overproduction of foodstuffs. We just talked about that. But not just here in the United States, also in France and Italy and Australia. We just had too much food and not enough money to pay the farmers. Millions of people buying stock on margin. We've talked about that. When you buy stock on margin, you put in a little bit of money hoping for a big reward, but if the stock goes down, now you have to pay everything that you paid in plus the amount that you didn't pay in. Some of you who are paying attention 2 weeks ago when we had the whole thing with GameStop, that's what's going on here, kind of. Britain raises its interest rates because it cannot afford the trade, so we have, again, the tariffs going between point A and point B, and then maybe it's all of the above, and it probably is all of the above. So on Black Monday, we lost 12.8%. On Black Tuesday, they lost 11.7%. And goodness, and at that point, people were jumping out of windows. Now, interestingly enough, on Wednesday, the very next Wednesday, it's called Recovery Wednesday, and nobody really talks about that, but we did recover 12% of the loss. But it was too late at that point because people were already calling in all the margins, and lots of people were, it wasn't good. The cartoon here actually talks about Recovery Wednesday. We have the guy jumping out of the window. And we did have people do that. People jumping out of the windows in New York City because they were so depressed, committing suicide. And on his way down, he sees the stock market is starting to go back up. He says, "Up 3 points? My God," GAWD. "My God, I jumped too soon." One of my favorite deep thoughts by Jack Handey. Okay, you have no idea who that is, but he had some really interesting comments on TV on one of the late night shows with Dave Letterman. So, and he just had really short, pithy comments. And one of my favorites was, if you ever decide to jump out of a tall building, then on your way down, and I'm paraphrasing, on the way down, you should just go limp. People looking up might think that you're a dummy, and then they'll try to catch you because, hey, free dummy. You shouldn't laugh about that. Go to Google, type in Jack Handey deep thoughts. You will not regret it. All right. So, not only the stock market comes tumbling down, but we have a situation with regard to a drought in the middle of the country, and the drought's going to be bad. And we're going to have the Dust Bowl. Those of you who took Oklahoma history, you know all about the Dust Bowl. So this is bad, bad, bad. And so we have a book, ultimately, is going to be written, The Grapes of Wrath, right? And so the Grapes of Wrath that one of our previous AP English teachers here, that was like his book, and every student who took his class read The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. And so the short version of the book is the protagonist, Tom Joad. He's the book opens and he's getting out of McAllister prison for a murder that he did, that he may or may not have committed. And he goes back to his farm, and his family is not there. They've moved in with an uncle because they've lost all of their food because the Dust Bowl and the bank has foreclosed on the house. And ultimately, the family decides that they're going to take a trip right down Highway 66, and they're going to go to California. And so the Okies are going to go to California, which is actually the first time that the word Okie is talked about, and so it comes from this book. Anyway, so the Okies are going to go to California, and so the book talks about their journey from Point A, Oklahoma, from Sallisaw, Oklahoma, all the way to California. And how much do I want to do? I don't really talk about it. I mean, some people make it, some people don't. But the point is, when they get there, they're going to find out, a whole bunch of other people came up with the same idea, and so now there's way too many people in California, and they have all these little Hoovervilles. See, I knew what I was doing. Hooverville. There's a picture of a Hooverville. So a Hooverville is basically you can kind of see it's a group of shacks that are basically put up overnight, and they're made out of basically anything that people can get. So we would say the slums today, right? Aluminum roofs and cardboard walls and that kind of stuff. And they're called Hoovervilles, named after the president because they're trying to take a shot at him. And so these are all the people who cannot get jobs. And we're going to talk more about the Great Depression next week when we get to FDR. But the food lines and all this crazy stuff that, interesting enough, that we're kind of going through right now with regard to COVID. But the Hoovervilles, okay. I was about to give away a huge plot point in the book, but you know what? Read the book instead. At least Wikipedia, I guess. Yeah, is it? I'm sure it is. So Hoover, now he's about to get out of office. He's about to get out of office at this point. And so one of his philosophies of how to get out of the Depression, which is just starting, it hasn't really gone crazy yet, but it's just starting. His philosophy is kind of interesting. He says, look, the American people, they're resilient. They can do it themselves. The companies will hire people, and it's going to happen. The Americans are resilient, and we can rebound from this, and we don't need help from the government. That's what the president said. And okay, that's one way to go. That's a very Republican philosophy. But then he gets a whole bunch of backlash, and he says, okay, we will bail out some of the companies. So he starts to bail out the railroads. He wants to bail out the banks. He wants to bail out the credit companies, which is interesting because a lot of people argue that the railroads, the banks, and the credit companies are some of the reasons that we have the Depression. So he wasn't very popular about that. It's funny how history repeats itself. Okay. One of Hoover's ideas was kind of interesting. Public works. Now, he's basically going to put his big toe into the pond when it comes to this. FDR, the next president, is really going to, he's going to jump all the way in with this. But the public works. So the public works idea is that you get a lot of people, you put them to work on projects that are needed. So, for example, if you dam up the Colorado River there and use, I just lost my light. That's okay. You don't really need to see me. If you dam up the Colorado River, I'm really dark today. No? Gosh, you don't see me. That's okay. You don't need to see me. If you dam up the Colorado River, then you can generate a lot of hydroelectric. I feel like I'm just can't even see myself. Let me turn on a flashlight. Flashlight. Whew, that's too much. Better. Now I've got a flashlight. Dam up the Colorado River, and then you get all the hydroelectricity, and then Las Vegas can have electricity. And so you make it a really large dam. You call it the Hoover Dam. Named after the president, right? Hoover Dam. Has anybody been to the Hoover Dam? It is, it's huge. It was the hottest it was the second hot, nope. It was the third hottest temperature I've ever been in. The first hottest temperature I've ever been in was when Mrs. Jones and I went out to hey, we're about to go down a rabbit hole. I'm going to say 3 minutes. I'm going to say 2 minutes. We went to Death Valley, California. I think it was like 121 degrees. We took a picture of the thermometer. Pretty cool. No, it wasn't cool. It was hot. That was very hot. The next hottest I've ever been was actually at Gla, G-L-A, Gla, which is a little hill out in Boeotia, Greece. So I'm actually kind of curious if you could Wikipedia Gla, G-L-A. Anyway, we're up on top of the hill for like all day. I drank, 16, 17 Gatorades that day, and that was crazy hot. It was like 117, 118 degrees out there. And we were out there with no shade. That was a tough day. The third hottest I've ever been was actually at the Hoover Dam, which is, interestingly enough, it was the day right before that we went out to Death Valley. Anyway, Mrs. Jones and I, we got out of the car, and I'm thinking it was like 110 outside or something like that. So it's like, it's not crazy hot, but 110 is pretty hot. But here's why it was so hot, was because the concrete. You look at this dam. There's so much concrete out there, and you guys know when it's a hot day and you go out in the concrete and you're like, ooh, there's so much concrete. It's like we opened the car door and it felt like I was stepping into an oven. Like crazy hot. Anyway, the Hoover Dam. If you haven't been, you need to go. It's kind of cool. No, it was hot. Well, I guess some of that. So he did some of these things. He did some of these projects, but he didn't do other projects that FDR is going to do later. So, for example, the Tennessee River Dam. He's not going to do that because he thinks that that's a socialist issue, and as a Republican, he's not going to push that. FDR is going to bring this back. And then other stuffs. I'm going to go close my door because I got people walking by. I'll be right back. Oof. Routing the bonus army in Washington. Okay, so as last we left, I said, I'm sure nothing bad's going to happen. We have we had Harding's, during his tenure, they passed the bonus bill. And so $1 for every day that you were in the Army, $1.25 for every day you were in the Army if you were across the pond. But it's going to take 20 years. Well, a lot of the veterans said, hey, in 20 years, we're going to be dead. So we want our money now. And plus, we think we should just get paid right now. And so a group of them decided to march on Washington. So they marched up from Washington to the Capitol steps, and they planted themselves there on the grass and set up tents and all this crazy stuff, and complained and got the newspapers out there and took pictures of them. And Hoover made a poor decision. He sent the Army out to remove the veterans from Washington, D.C. He sent the Army to kick out the veterans. Let me tell you how well that went in the newspapers, in the press, on the TV shows. There weren't any TV shows. No, not really. So, yeah, that was a political mistake. They didn't get their money. Meanwhile, while everybody's going crazy with the Depression, not just the United States, but also world history, Japan is, they're watching everybody, and they're like, hey, since nobody's watching, let's go attack China. And so they went and attacked China and took Manchuria, and then they had all those situations. And you got the famous picture of the guy holding, with the sword, and he's holding the guy's head. And the League of Nations saw what was going on. The League of Nations said, bad Japan. And remember, the United States is not part of the League of Nations because of all that situation from last video. And so there's no teeth for the League of Nations. Japan said, oops, okay, well, we'll stop attacking China. No, they didn't. That's okay, because I'm sure they'll stop where they are and not expand the Empire of Japan any further. What year was this? 1932? Last slide. Wow, that's kind of short today. Last slide. So Hoover's going out. FDR, we'll talk about him extensively next video or 2 or 3. FDR's coming in, and so we have a political cartoon here of Hoover going up to FDR's front door and saying, "Hey, I'm bringing you the baby." And so the baby is the United States. And please note, along with the baby come all the troubles of the baby, including war debts and farm problems and bank problems and unemployment and economy issues and the budget. And here you go, FDR. Good luck with this. So, Hoover, turning from domestic failures, Hoover decided to pull troops out of Nicaragua and on his way out. And FDR is actually going to use this as a cornerstone to his good neighbor policy, which we'll look at next video. I'm thinking about what are we doing for our readings this week. We're going to do the only thing you have to fear is fear itself. So that's FDR. And it all makes sense. It'll all make sense when you read it. Questions, comments, outcries, outbursts, you know how to get a hold of me. And that's all I got for this week. Hey, go out and build yourself a snowman. Do you want to build a snowman? I'll see you. Hopefully we'll have Zoom. Whatever. Be good.